Good morning, everyone. I've seen that some people asked to do it in English, so let's go for English then. Good morning, everyone. I've just created a small update on what's explained during Agility. I've more focused on what's in regarding automation, NGINX, and then the last part is more going on the new offerings of F5. Regarding SaaS-based applications. So Koen is also going to give at the end a demo on the cloud services, what they have today. And before that, let's start with the presentation. So how can we automate implementations for NGINX and Big IP? As you can see, more and more companies are using automation to update their environments. In this graph, you see some figures on Amazon, Netflix, on how many times that they are updating their applications. But how are you doing it? How are you updating your application? Will you do it monthly, daily, and how is automation implemented in your organization? The automation lifecycle nowadays is more likely what's shown over here. First of all, we are going to bootstrap our environment. So we are going to create an image, to build that image, to onboard the image by sending configurations via an API to that system. We will deploy the application services. We are going to monitor them. And with the feedback that the different systems gather, we are going to implement a change in that environment. But before we can go into detail on how we can continue, we need to understand the difference between imperative and declarative model. The imperative model is the old model. So we are going to define a flow on different aspects in our application lifecycle. We are going to define everything in detail. And for example, here it's for a sandwich. It's how we are going to make a sandwich, what we are going to select on the sandwich, how we are going to enjoy it at the end. But with the declarative model, is we are going to order it, and a system itself is going to process it, and at the end, you're going to get everything in one go. So the benefits of that one is that it can go faster. It's not always required to have the correct expertise because everything is well documented. It requires a few API calls. And of course, which is also important, it minimizes the false positives or deployment errors that you can get during your implementation. So the automation lifecycle from F5, what we know of today, and these are all configurations that we see today, is that we can bootstrap our image by the image generator. We have on the clouddocs.f5.com website, we have different cloud solution templates, and we have different declarative onboarding examples. We can also use Cloud Init if we want. Then we are going to deploy our different applications. We are going to monitor them. And afterwards, when the monitoring or we need to change our application, we can change that applications also by different SDKs that are developed by F5. Within those solution templates, we have also different solution templates developed by F5 to standardize the big IP configurations within our different cloud environments like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So therefore, we can have some supported templates that already exist and that we can use to implement F5 services into our different cloud environments. For declarative onboarding, what's the goal of it? It's in fact we are going to configure our F5, and we are going to configure different topics like layer 1, layer 2 deployments, which can at that moment become very simple and using different REST APIs. At that moment, it reduces the need for detailed F5 knowledge or big IP knowledge. It reduces some errors that you're going to get during the onboarding, during the configuration itself. And it integrates also with BigIQ centralized management. ES3, on the other hand, at that moment, you're going to create different applications within your big IP. It's also using different API calls. And at that moment, you can integrate it also with big IP and BigIQ, or you can run it also within a container so that you have different means to configure your F5 at that moment. When everything is configured, you want also that you know what's the feedback that you can get from your F5 itself, and what are the use cases or what are streams that you can have within your F5 itself. Maybe at the end, you're going to see some errors that you can see and that you need to change your configuration due to these errors. Here we see some example declarations for onboarding, for the declarative onboarding, for the AS3 scripting, and for the monitoring. As you can see, it's our simple JSON scripts that you can define and that you can use within different environments. In BigIQ, you have the possibility to use these different JSON objects for do and AS3, for declarative onboarding and AS3, so that you can simplify the deployment of your big IP, and it's not always the onboarding of one big IP, but at that moment you can onboard different big IPs, and from BigIQ at that moment you can view also the use of your different applications and maybe also the errors within the application itself. So by using declarative onboarding and AS3, you're going to minimize, and it's not always required to have the detailed knowledge on BigIQ itself. The problem nowadays is that a lot of implementations on F5 are infra-centric. So what do we mean? Different groups within your organizations, like the NetOps teams and the SecOps teams, are using the F5, and everyone is configuring a specific part of the F5 itself. So what's about security? What's about customer experience? Are we sure that our application that we are building, that the customer likes it? Therefore, we are going to move more nowadays to an app-centric approach instead of an infra-centric approach. Or infra at that moment is just used by different groups within our system, like the NetOps teams, the SecOps teams, and we are going to use also different ecosystems that we are going to integrate into our applications by using different APIs. And then we can get, then at the result, we know that we can get some security and compliance. We know because we have an integration with different toolings that the customer experience will grow, and that we can also see how our application is growing. Our application is not used anymore only into our data center, but it can be built into the cloud, onto different softwares, and even we can use containers within these applications. So within NGINX Controller, it's also a tool within NGINX, what you can use within the use of your containers, or what you can use within your applications. At that moment, you're going to automation, you're going to understand more, and you can also integrate with different teams at that moment. If you want to know more on NGINX Controller, at that moment, there are some web pages where you can request free trials and where you have some use cases that are written down and that you can help to develop and to use BigIQ, NGINX Controller besides BigIQ. When we are talking about automation and we are talking about app-centric approaches, at that moment we are thinking more and more on Kubernetes. Nowadays, we are more using Kubernetes, we are more using our applications, and therefore there was a group called DORA, the DevOps Research and Assessment Team. They're working together with Google Cloud to view what's going on into the application world itself. And as we can see, we have seen more applications coming up. We see that the application deployment is going much faster. And we see that the failure rate at that moment is going lower. But how we are going to make this transformation for these applications? Are we using containers? Are we using Kubernetes to manage these containers? Are we using microservices? But nowadays, it's always more a mixture of these applications. So we are going more into the hybrid model on using Kubernetes in combination with containers and microservices. Of course, how the different teams are seeing it, it's from a different perspective. The perspective from a DevOps team, it's more going from the code towards the customer. Unlike the NetOps teams, are more working from the customer itself and using the different tool chains to grow to the code and to protect maybe the code at that moment. When we are using Kubernetes within our application path, you can see that we are going to simplify our NGINX deployments. And as you can see with the F5 and NGINX Plus deployments, we can use it on different spots. We have at that moment we have different locations, 4 locations where we can deploy these application services. We have the edge, we have the Ingress Controller, we have the per services proxy, and we have the per pod proxy. So at the edge, it's where we are normally deploying our F5 nowadays. The per services proxy and the per prod proxy, together with the Ingress Controller, that are new locations where we have to think on where we can put some extra security. But the problem is, of course, where we are going to, how we are going to deploy these proxies. What's the requirement and what's the effect, the necessary application services? We have 4 different locations. So what's now the best practice to use these 4 locations? Therefore, we have some questions that we are going to raise up front. Is it an application, small application, or where we are going to implement our NGINX Plus? Is it owned by DevOps and SecOps teams? So that's also another question. Who is going to own this application and where we are going to see this application? So therefore, F5 has built 2 new tools called the NGINX Ingress Controller, which is built also, it's coming in via, and we have also the big IP Ingress Controller services. The Ingress Controller serves is in fact a container that you're going to run in your environment, which is linked to your Kubernetes or OpenShift orchestration environment, and that can create a management link towards your big IP environment to automate configurations and to see what's going on into your container environment itself. So as an example can be, when the load on your container environment grows, maybe at that moment an application is added because there is a requirement. The container service sees it, and at the moment it can respond towards your big IP, identifying that a new application has been added, so that at that moment automatically the performance can raise through your big IP. On the other hand, we have the NGINX Ingress Controller, and the NGINX Ingress Controller, at that moment, it's going to route the traffic towards the correct application container within your Kubernetes environment. It's routing, it supports airbag services, and at that moment, since it's routed, it knows where to send the traffic to. Normally, it can be also combined with an external load balancer, because at the moment we are going to route the traffic to the different nodes that we have in our environment. A simple example can be web application firewall. We have different web user profiles, and these profiles can be from our DevOps teams or can be from our NetOps teams. Our NetOps teams, they like more to have a WAF profile centrally, while the DevOps teams, they want to have a profile more close to their applications itself. While a NetOps team, is more, the concern of a NetOps team is more the governance and the stability, is while the DevOps teams, while they want to add web application services to their close to their application, they want to speed up the process. So therefore, we have different solutions for that. When we are talking to the edge, at that moment we are going to use the container ingress services in combination with an F5 to see what's going on into our application, into our Kubernetes environment. And when there is a change, at that moment, automatically this change is adopted into our big IP. The advantage of that one is that the NetOps administrators or the SecOps administrators, they are going to link to their DevOps admins, to the DevOps guys, and they have a stable WAF environment. We can also at that moment include other different solutions from big IP, like load balancing, DDoS, and other services. We can also include WAF on the Ingress Controller. At that moment, we have one pipeline where we can define what different WAF policies we want to add onto our Ingress controllers. We can at that moment enforce policies per listeners. So it's our DevOps guy who is going to manage the WAF policies itself. When we bring it closer to the application itself, we can bring also WAF to the per services proxy. At that moment, it's per proxy that we are going to use a WAF policy instead of having a general WAF policy on the edge or on the Ingress controller. We have one for one specific proxy. Sometimes there is also a need to add an extra WAF policy on the per pod. So we're just bringing it closer to the application itself, and we are going to integrate the WAF updates also within the application itself. As a summary, it's important to know who is going to manage the WAF updates, who is going to manage the WAF policies itself, and how frequent we want to update our WAF integration itself. So therefore, we need to define where we are going to put our WAF policies itself. We can do it on the edge, or we can do it on different locations into our Kubernetes environments. In the future, during Agility, it's also announced that they are going to integrate different services in the Ingress controller, and that way they can do a callback towards the F5 to have a WAF policy and some other policies within the Ingress controller itself. So at that moment, the automation can go faster from the Kubernetes environment and the Ingress controller towards your F5. Within NGINX Plus, they are going to add also a module, an app protect module, that makes use of the WAF signature database that we know today. And at that moment, it's going to incorporate that module into our NGINX Plus environment so that we can use the strength of the WAF signature databases within our WAF policies that we are going to bring into our NGINX environment. Of course, when we want to bring all this knowledge into our NGINX Plus, it's still us as developers or us as admins that have to manage our WAF policies. So therefore, F5 has announced during Agility also a new SaaS environment to bring it up as web application protection. Why? More and more applications are brought into our internet connected. Sorry. So more and more applications are also, we do not know it anymore where they are running. Are they vulnerable for different attacks? And as you can see, also from the moment that you connect an application to the internet, at that moment you know that within some minutes your application itself will be scanned to find some vulnerabilities. And when a vulnerability is found, at that moment it can take some time before there is an application takeover from the internet itself. So we have some software vulnerabilities that are known based on the operating systems and application service. We have some different weaknesses defined also in the WAF top 10 that we know from our applications. And are we always sure that the application that we are using and that are using the different operating systems, databases, and so on, that are free or that are protected for the weaknesses into our applications itself? Therefore, we are going to use different tools into our applications to protect our applications against software vulnerabilities, against targeted attacks, and against logic attacks. So nowadays, we are going to use more and more different tools to protect our applications against these different attacks. Therefore, F5 has now brought a new product into the market called F5 Cloud Services Essential App Protect Service. It's a cloud service. It's a simple SaaS service where you can protect your application against different attack vectors. It's a very easy SaaS application where you do not need the required knowledge to protect your web application knowledge to configure your application protection on different layers. It offers already some protections, and it's going to simplify your application protection itself. It's done via checkbox. You can use also an API if you want to configure your new application and you want to configure application protection. And behind all this story is the F5 security knowledge that we know from the signature databases and so on that we are going to use within the SaaS service. As we can see here in this slide, it's very easy to configure all the different different topics into the SaaS service itself. It's via one click that we can turn off or turn off malicious IP protection. When there is an event shown, we can have details on what's going on to this event, from where it comes, and also when a user gets a blocking ID, with that blocking ID, we easily can track the information on what's the user and from where it comes and so on. So it's also threat campaign integration. So at that moment, we can have a detailed information on what's the threat itself and from where it comes and what's the content of the threat itself. We can use different compliancy, different geolocation enforcements, and so on that we know also today from the WAF, but in this case, it's just via one click and everything is configured that we can enforce protocol compliance, geolocation enforcements, file limitations, and so on. Like I said already, it's DevOps friendly, so from a moment that you know how to configure a JSON that you know how to configure your JSON file at that moment via an API call. In this example, Postman, for example, you can configure your environment, your web app, your application environments quickly when you're adding a new application into the internet. So at the end, the Essential App Protect, it's cloud friendly, checkbox simply, DevOps friendly, and we are still using the F5 security expertise that we know today. Within cloud services itself, we have also different other solutions. It's always cloud native. We can use different APIs, or we have a nice GUI where we can at that moment configure our environments. And it's always based on the knowledge that F5 already has created in the past by building his big IP platform. And with that knowledge, they've now built different SaaS services. As you can see, these different SaaS services can be configured via portal or via an API call. They can manage different workloads, and the cloud services themselves, like the DNS load balancer, the DNS cloud service, the Essential App Protect, and Beacon, they are all integrated into one portal. There is now a small demo from Koen itself on the cloud services on what we can do with and how we can configure these cloud services. Koen, I'm going to give you the hands.
Please. Yeah, can you hear me? One second. To screen two. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me and see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Okay, so thanks for having me. My name is Koen van der Poorten, ZF5. So here's a very short demo of our cloud services. As Thierry already said, they are meant to be very easy to use and to consume. And it's a really flexible system where you on the fly can provision and spin up services like DNS, DNS load balancer, or the Essential App Protect, which is, as Thierry already said, a lightweight, let's say a lightweight, but still very powerful web application firewall. So it's a multi-tenant cloud portal. So that means that you can, for your organization, have multiple users, each with their own rights. So you could, for example, have somebody managing the DNS system, another person managing the Essential App Protect, etc. So to give some very short demos, the DNS service, this is basically a managed secondary DNS. So that means that the customer still needs to have a primary DNS somewhere, in-house or maybe at an ISP, but he wants to have a very robust secondary DNS that is used for public access by the main public, that is resilient against DDoS attacks, etc., and at the same time very easy to use. So in this case, you can see that I have copied a zone file from a primary DNS, and let me quickly show you the primary DNS in this demo. It's a Windows server with DNS on it, and as you can see, I have here the records. Now, what happened is that during configuration, this cloud service pulled in the records from the F5 Belux demo site. So you have the zone file here. It is read-only. As you know, you can only change them from the primary DNS. Let me quickly show that if I would add, for example, a record here, demo with an IP address 1.2.3.4, it's non-existent, of course. I add it here. It's still not here, but the moment I click save, you can see that it has synchronized the records and it is now accessible. As Thierry already mentioned, this is full DevOps. So what I can also show to you is that it is easy to do all this via the REST API that we have. So in this case, I want to deploy a secondary DNS zone for a domain called F5 API. .site. So I will do this with Postman. Postman is a tool that can send API calls to, in this case, for example, the REST API of the cloud services. So let me quickly log in. We have the access token, and now I can start to interrogate the DNS through these scripts. So you can see that I have indeed the F5 Belux demos.site, as you can see here. Now, if I want to create a new one, it's as easy as creating this script, pointing it to the correct main, the cloud services will know where to find the primary zone for this. And if I now refresh this, I have the configuration here. It's still inactive. I can activate it through the website or again through Postman. Okay, so as you can see, it's fully automatable, and it fits very nicely in a CI/CD pipeline, for example, where you want to deploy automatically zone files. Another solution in the cloud services is the DNS load balancer. So the goal of this is to make your websites highly available by doing load balancing across DNS records. Okay, so what happens here is that I have a main DNS record called www.f5belux demo site. It's a public record, but I am delegating it to another DNS server, as you can see here in a public DNS, to the cloud services. So basically what happens is, if you try to go to this www address, you will be redirected, or you will be redirected to the cloud services, and they will translate your request to one of two machines, in this case, which are in a pool that the DNS will load balance across. Okay, so I have a pool here with round robin. I will load balance across two IP endpoints. And if you test this, that's pretty easy. Yeah, you can see that I am now being resolved to a machine that is running in AWS, as I have specified here. The solution will continuously monitor these endpoints. So if one of those two will go down, I would be immediately redirected to the other one. Instead of in Amazon, I would arrive on Azure, for example. And another use case is geo IP, where based on where I sit, what my source IP is, I would be redirected, for example, to the US or to a data center in Europe, or even within Belgium, in the different provinces. Okay, so it's really simple to set up, and it can be very interesting, for example, to load balance or to do high availability across different cloud providers, across Amazon, Google Cloud, Azure, etc. And then to finish this off, I have a final demo here for the Essential App Protect. So this is our cloud-based web application firewall. The goal is, again, to point the DNS records of your application. Instead of directly to your application, you should point them to us, this is a randomly generated name for this website, and I have a CNAME record for that. So that means that if you would go to that website, and I called it hackathon f5belux demo.site, instead of going directly to the application, you pass through the cloud services. Okay, so I have some monitoring here. It shows me the last 5 minutes, so nothing happened here. Here is a configuration. It's also totally automatable. You can see this is the FQDN. I want to listen on port 80, but also on HTTPS. So I have my certificates imported. I can do some compliance, some privacy in practice. That means that I can take care that unauthorized content is not, responses do not go out of the application. For example, PCI numbers or social security numbers, stuff like that. I'm having some basic firewall settings like attack signatures, blacklisting or whitelisting IPs, geolocation enforcement, compliance with regards to HTTP headers, allowed and disallowed file types, method enforcement. And you can also see I can have this in monitoring mode, so it will only alert me of problems, or in blocking mode, and then it will block them. I also have a malicious IP feed here, and that is the same as the IPI license that we have on our big IPs. And so I have a bunch of categories here. For example, anonymous proxies. If you do not want people coming from anonymous proxies to your website, you can simply block this. This database is being updated every 5 minutes. Threat campaigns is a feature that comes straight out of our advanced WAF. So these are attack signatures that are, instead of being very generic, they are very precise. So we look at who is doing the attack, how are they doing the attack, and what do they want to accomplish. For example, a Chinese hacking group that wants to hack your Drupal server in order to install a crypto miner, for example. Again, monitoring or blocking modes. And then this is the settings for the redirection for the DNS. And the cool thing is you also have your configuration in a JSON form. So I could, if I wanted, I could change this IP address, click update, and I would have changed the configuration. But of course, I can also send this JSON file through a with Postman or with Ansible or in a pipeline or whatever. Now to do a quick and easy demo, just to show you something about the logging. So let's pretend I'm doing cross-site scripting in a search window. What happens is I try to hack the website and it tells me something is not quite right. In practice, I got blocked and I get this support ID. Now, if I go back to my tool, let me see. I hope it doesn't take too long to update. Yeah, I still have some old stuff here. So what it saw was I was blocked by an attack signature with illegal meta characters because of the slash and the bigger than smaller than signs here. From this events window, I could block the source IP address, and this is my home IP address. I could say whitelisted or blacklisted. I could mark it as an exception, so this this attack wouldn't be triggered anymore. And as you can see, you have some nice information here that you can export if you want. It's pretty simple. Of course, if you compare this to an advanced WAF or an ASM, it's rather basic. But the goal is to make this very lightweight, very quick to put in place. And so it's perfect for next generation applications that you want to quickly spin up in a cloud and then protect with a decent web application firewall. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to show. Any questions here? I don't know if people can use a chat or can use their microphone.
Yeah, they can use the chat.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions, neither hands. So everything's
probably crystal clear, which is good. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, I'm going to stop sharing. Oh yeah, you already kicked me out.
Yeah,
okay.
I already kicked you out.
Okay,
so
perfect.
If you want to try all these things, all the new fancy things within the SaaS services from F5, you can try for free the DNS Cloud Service, DNS Load Balancer Service, Essential App Protection, and even the new service F5 Beacon. So just go to these websites, to these pages on the F5 website, and then you can subscribe yourself automatically. Or if you want to do, you have also here some useful links where you can find some more information on the different services. We have also the link towards the different cloud services itself, the general link, and details on how to use the API. You can find it on devcentral.f5.com. That's from me. I do not know if there are any questions from other people at the moment. No questions till now. So I assume it's crystal clear for everyone. So if you have a question, raise your hand or type it in the Q&A box. If you're thinking on something outside this presentation, you still can send your questions to Stefan. He's our BDM of F5 at Exclusive Networks in Belgium, and he can help you with the guidance toward all these new services. Otherwise, that's it for me. If you have holidays in the upcoming weeks, enjoy your holidays and see you next time in another WebEx. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.